bringing the story of three Cs to the world and sharing the excitement of potential and the people that we have in this region. Now, in recently published Global Risk Report for 2024, the World Economic Forum is actually not painting a rosy picture. They are talking about the different kind of threats, ranging from AI-supported misinformation, disinformation, the shortages of resources, climate changes, inflation, etc., etc. But I think the key is not about the risks, but how we address these. And I think the three Cs region is exactly the point, how collaboration and cross-border cooperation can provide for addressing shortcomings, for actually working for common future and benefiting from that. This is a region of 125 million people with the investment needs exceeding 650 billion euro, only to bring the infrastructure in that part of Europe to on par with what is currently in the Western European Union. But that's not only this. Is not the needs that is important. It's the potential what is here for actually making the business, but not only making the business, making the life better. And we, as a Polish Development Bank, we together with our friends, with the development institutions and development banks from the region, we have 5 years ago, we have set up the 3Cs Initiative Investment Fund, to invest in and develop in the region, but also to prove the concept that you can have a very exciting business opportunities in the 3Cs countries. We have managed to raise about 1 billion euro in capital, and we have deployed basically the entire sum in 5 different projects that are addressing the investment needs and investment potential in the 3Cs countries. And this has already generated the additional value of 6 billion euro for the economies of the region. Well, I think we will discuss a lot about it today and tomorrow and Thursday. So let me put a stop here and let me give the floor to the distinguished panelists, please.
Well, thank you, Paweł. Thank you for those remarks, and thank you for the leadership that you and BGK have provided to the 3Cs, the standing up of the 3Cs Initiative Investment Fund. My name is Ian Brzezinski. I'm a senior fellow in Atlantic Council, and it's a real privilege here in Davos, on this beautiful morning, sunny morning here in Davos, to help moderate this panel, 3Cs as a driver of European growth. And for those of you who don't know, the 3Cs Initiative is an effort by 13 EU member states between the Baltic, situated between the Baltic, Black, and Adriatic seas, who are combining their resources to accelerate the development of cross-border energy, transport, and digital infrastructure in that region. It's all about leveraging the power of cross-border infrastructure and the connectivity that comes with it to drive economic growth in the region, to reinforce economic resilience, and to strengthen Europe's military security. It's all about self-initiative. This is what strikes me about the 3Cs. It's a regional initiative of self-initiative and collaboration to harness the power of the free market to fulfill and complete the vision of a single European market and a Europe that's undivided, free, and secure, because infrastructure is the underpinning of that vision. And as Paweł pointed out, the 3Cs region is well positioned for success in this endeavor. It's got 125 million people. That accounts for 25% of the EU population. It's got $2 trillion in GDP, and it features some of Europe's highest growth rates and rates of return for direct investment. So it's no surprise that the 3Cs region can be considered a driver of European growth. And with that said, let me introduce our panel. We have here in blue in the center Her Excellency Mariya Gabriel, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Bulgaria, and she previously served as a European Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth, and before that, as a European Commissioner for Digital Economy and Security. Immediately to my left, we have the Governor Nobumitsu Hayashi. I hope I got that right. Thank you. He's the Governor of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. This is a state-owned financial institution. He's a career civil servant who served as a senior advisor to the Japanese Prime Minister and was director for Japan at the World Bank. In pink, next to Fred Kemp, is Ms. Beata Dajinska-Mujika, who's a special representative of the President of the Republic of Poland for the 3 Cs. She recently just ended her tenure as the director of BGK, the Polish Development Bank. She led the establishment of the 3 Cs Initiative Investment Fund and has been a powerful leader of the 3 Cs Initiative.
President, not leader.
President, excuse me, president of BGK. And Mr. Fred Kemp, who's the president and CEO of the Atlantic Council, my boss. Before taking the helm of the council in 2007, he had a 25-year career as an award-winning journalist and author, journalist at the Wall Street Journal. So with that said, let me start with our 2 regional representatives here, the Foreign Minister and Beata. I want to explore, what distinguishes the 3 Cs region that makes it so attractive for foreign direct investment, such a dynamic economic region. What's special, what's different about Central Eastern Europe, Austria, and Greece that makes it a driver of European growth? Foreign Minister?
Well, first, I would like to thank Atlantic Council for organizing this discussion. I think that that's a great opportunity for all of us to see how we can transform the challenges into opportunities, because I think that first, the region has enormous strengths. Maybe I will start with some harmonized legislations because of the European law, and it's always good to have the legal predictability for any investment. I think that we have already the free movement of goods, services, and persons. There is a very business-friendly environment, a dynamic market, and something else. This region, it's of strategic importance. Now, with Russia's aggression in Ukraine, we can see the region as the counterbalance for geopolitical challenges, because we would like to improve the connectivity, we would like much more regional cooperation, we would like to diversify and restore supply chains, to talk about how we can reduce dependencies. So you can see that in the middle of all these, we have a strength that is to be future-oriented, because we count already on a very solid base. And I would like to add here the role of talents, because this region is full with plenty of talents, engineers, young people in the IT sector. And I must say, I even would like to add women in science, young researchers in ICT. So you can see that with talents, with business-friendly environment, with already facilities for investors, and because of the strategic importance of the region, there is a huge potential to unlock.
Beata, can you elaborate a little bit more on the potentials you're trying to unleash here in Central and Eastern Europe?
If you allow me, good morning, everybody. If you allow me to start with the broader context, because if we are deeply involved in the 3 Cs region, we understand this region, we represent this region, so we assume that everybody understands this region perfectly as we understand this region. But it is very important to give some context how this 3 Cs was established. How this 3 Cs initiative was established by our presidents, the 12 presidents. And it was a very important moment in New York in 2015. And it is very important to underline that it was the United Nations Summit, and we discussed, and the United Nations signed a very important agreement between countries, Agenda 2030. And one of the points of this agenda, it is how we build the sustainable development across the world. And one of this points is how to build the connectivity and the axis north-south, not only to develop the east-west, west-east connectivity. That is obvious. Maybe for Japan, It is north-south, it is obvious. But for the rest of the countries, and especially for Europe, the most supply chains is only east-west. And during this fantastic summit, the mother and father, as we used to call our President Duda and President Croatia, Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic, he was the first president who established this initiative. The first summit was in Dubrovnik, the second summit was in Poland, 12 countries with the huge potential. But we represented the Central Eastern part of European Union with the history with the Iron Curtain. So we have a lot of infrastructure gaps, especially on the axis north-south. This calculation was presented by Paweł, by you, that if we want to have the same quality of infrastructure which exists already in the western part of Europe, we have to invest up to 2030 over 650 billion euro. But not for the entire infrastructure, only in 3 sectors: energy, digital, and logistics and transportation. This is a huge amount of money. And it's worth to underline that these figures represent the report before war, before crisis, before the huge inflation across the world. So probably we have to spend more and more money. But this context of this 3 seas region and as you mentioned about the 3 seas, exactly 3 seas, Baltic, Adriatic, and the Black Sea. It is huge entrance to these gates between our ports, and how we build the infrastructure resilience, strategic infrastructure. It will be the answer how we can boost our economy and how we can speed up to develop the entire region. And this region, in the deglobalization and the global context, it's more and more and more important. And I am very proud as the former president of BGK together, and I would like to thank you, my colleagues from the management board, that during the second summit in Poland, we're sitting together across in the boardroom, and because the whole Warsaw was closed. All streets was closed because it was summit. The number of representatives from the number of countries. And okay, so what we can do as a financial institution for this brilliant initiative? Okay, we have enough knowledge and experience and competences to set up the International Investment Fund and encourage our colleagues from the other countries like Bulgaria and the others development institution. Let's set up the fund as a trigger to interest this region and invest in this region. So today the story is developing, and I'm very happy that we can discuss not only in Davos when the policymakers are discussing about the future of the global economy, but as you see, we have the huge representation as a 3 seas new opportunities hub here in Davos. So it is my pleasure to share with you these opportunities with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. So you we're addressing a legacy of Soviet occupation. It's created an infrastructure gap that you're estimating to be about $600 to $700 billion when compared, or what would be needed to invest in cross-border infrastructure so that Central and Eastern Europe can match the infrastructural level that you find in Western Europe. And you're trying to unleash the potential of the region through this, and you created this investment fund to catalyze that development. Let me get the perspective from outside of the region. Governor Hayashi, give us a sense of, from Japan, from the Indo-Pacific, how are you looking at the 3 Seas region, and what do you find appealing and interesting about it? What motivates Japanese firms to look at this region, and what sectors are perhaps of greatest interest to them?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I am from outside, and here, or back in Bucharest when I attended the business forum, I'm always one of the very few Asian people present. So why I am interested in 3Cs and why I'm here, let me tell you. Well, the first thing is that 3Cs is about connectivity, as Beata said. Connectivity in technology, in energy, and in transportation. But I want to stress connectivity in energy. Because there has to be a lot more investment in this region because many countries are dependent either on coal or either on Russia. So, and at the COP meeting in Dubai, there was very strong recognition that we have to invest more in renewable energy to triple renewable energy by 2030 or to triple nuclear energy by 2050. Well, I agree with that. That's why we are investing in the US company NuScale, which has the most advanced SMR technology, and we are cooperating to build it in Romania by 2030. So these are things that we're doing, but what's lacking is the connectivity in energy. You have to spend much more in bringing the countries and the economies together. Well, it's not, investing in power grids is not as politically sexy or attractive as adding 1 gigawatt or 10 gigawatt in your electricity, but it is important. That's why we are financing connection between the UK or Germany or between Saudi and Egypt. And Japanese companies have a very good technology in direct account high voltage connection. So that's what we would like to see and would like to do in this region. And also 3Cs is about innovation and digitalization. And there are so many good, talented people, tech people in this region. We know that. So we set up a few years ago our venture capital fund in the Nordic and Baltic countries, which happens to be called Nordic Ninja. And last year we set up the second fund, and we'll be investing in high-tech digitalization and sustainability area. And we brought such excellent Japanese companies as Honda, Panasonic, and Omron, and try to see the joint ventures between those startups and Japanese companies. So this is what we are going to do as we see the gravity of Europe is moving more and more eastward. And finally, for me, 3Cs is about partnership with the people in the region and with the institutions in the region. And for me, it has been very, very important that that we have a partnership with Madame Muzutika and VGK. I can't thank Beata more of readership and friendship. So BGK issued samurai bond in Tokyo, which JBIC guaranteed 93 billion yen, the first samurai bond issue. And it meets the fiscal needs of the government of Poland in most generously welcoming the people of Ukraine, the women and children and handicapped people in Poland. So we are very proud of it. And President Zelensky, in his meeting in Hiroshima at the G7 last year with Prime Minister, they talked, and President Zelensky thanked about that. And we're still working on with BGK what we can do further to take opportunity of this partnership. We are partnership with the Exim Bank of Romania or USDFC or US Exim Bank, try to find what more we can do. You may know that Prime Minister Kishida of Japan said, what's happening in Ukraine may happen in Asia tomorrow. Well, we may be far away, but, well, you're surrounded by 3Cs, but Japan happens to be surrounded by 4Cs. I'm not quite sure, but you know, that is Pacific Ocean, the Sea of Japan, and Sea of Okhotsk, and East China Sea. We are a neighbor to Russia, a neighbor to China. So what's happening in Ukraine is not a faraway thing. We feel quite strong solidarity with the people in the region. And we want, based on such partnership, we want to contribute to connectivity and to innovation and to economic growth in the region. Thank you.
It's a really important point you make about Ukraine, and I hope we'll get a little bit into what the Three Seas relationship with Ukraine can be. But before I do that, let me turn to Fred Kemp, because the Atlantic Council has been involved with Three Seas from the very beginning. And perhaps you could share with us, your perspective on the Three Seas region, and perhaps your insights into America's perspective on the Three Seas, both geopolitically and in terms of the economic opportunities it presents for American businesses.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. And first of all, let me salute Beata and your leadership of BGK. Also proud to have you on our International Advisory Board of the Atlantic Council. And Paweł, it's just been such a pleasure working with you on this, and you brought this a long way. I also want to congratulate Ian. So in 2014, Ian was involved in a report chaired by General Jim Jones, former Supreme Allied Commander Europe, former Chairman of the Atlantic Council, and then Paweł, who was then the head of Grupa Lotos in Poland, Polish energy company, and it was a groundbreaking. I don't need to repeat myself for the first one. It was a groundbreaking report in 2014, where and it was called Completing Europe. We didn't come up with the term Three Seas. At that point, we called it a North-South corridor. And anyone who wants to understand the power of the North-South corridor in Central and Eastern Europe has to understand, has to fast forward to February of 2022 and understand what happens when you rely too much on the East-West corridor. Suddenly, you have an invasion of Ukraine, illegal, unprovoked. You have the whole of Western Europe's energy system thrown into chaos. And if they had thought more about interconnectivity, not east-west, but around the European Union, and not just north-south, but also north-south, I think you would have had less of an energy crisis at that time. And so I think this notion of completing Europe, you have to say Three Seas dash completing Europe, because this really fulfills or goes toward fulfilling President George H.W. Bush's vision of a Europe whole and free, which was the vision at the end of the Cold War after the Berlin Wall fell. I see the Three Seas as an economic arm of completing Europe. But the geopolitical necessity that goes hand in hand with it is that Ukraine has to prevail in the war that Putin has launched against us. And we'll get to that in a minute, as Ian said, but I don't think you can see them separately. I think Three Seas is an important piece of a jigsaw puzzle, a very important part of that puzzle to complete Europe. Now, I also wear another hat here, which is I'm on an advisory council of something called the Development Finance Corporation, which has put forward $300 million for this project. And I was very supportive of that, wearing that separate hat. So we've got 13 member states, 2.17 billion in GDP, or 13% of the European Union's GDP. 120 million people, 25% of the EU population. So 13% of EU GDP, 25% of its population, but growing faster than the rest. So in 2021, you had 11% growth in Poland, 10.5% Lithuania, and so forth. I'm so glad you gave your point of view on this from Japan. And I'm glad you talked about NuScale, because you talked about the $1 billion that's available. We've talked about the money that's being invested. But my vision for this is a map that doesn't just include the investment facility, but includes everything that's been invested. I think that's the only way you can look at the power of the Three Seas region, that it isn't one investment. NuScale's project in Romania should be seen as part of the Three Seas project. And with a U.S. company, it's working together with you, but doing small modular nuclear plants, where we also have some really interesting Polish companies that are involved in that. So my vision is my hope is that the Three Seas will view itself in a more expansive way including projects that are not technically considered right now as part of the three Cs. But I have an even more radical belief, and that is that the three Cs project should get ahead of the European Union in inviting Ukraine in as a member. And I think it would send a heavy signal that this is really what this project is about, and was always intended to be about building a north-south corridor of these three Cs. And then while we're at it, let's throw in the Western Balkans as well.
Well, following on that point on Ukraine, let's step back a little bit and let me ask, how has the volatility of the last couple of years affected the three Cs region's economic growth, its role as a driver of European growth? I mean, we've had the ups and downs of the economy consequent to COVID, and of course now we have the really urgent crisis of Russia's brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, which is right on the frontier of the three Cs. Beata, how has that affected the three Cs initiative? How has that affected the region's economy and its attractiveness to foreign direct investment?
Yes, this is the story about the threats and the opportunities. Always the threats is equal with the opportunities that we can create. Of course, the war in Ukraine, it is a new perspective that we have to look on our responsibility as a countries, as a neighbor countries in this region, and the infrastructure that we have to build in this region. It is crucial how in the future we can support Ukraine effectively. On the other hand, if we are thinking to support Ukraine only to the one hub in Rzeszów, it won't be possible. We have to speed up to build the infrastructure, and especially the roads and rail, which is crucial. But not only, because the energy infrastructure is so important as well, and the digital infrastructure also. Let me give you the two examples of the infrastructure and what is the huge challenge that we have in our region. The same distance between Tallinn and Sofia. How long it takes to get by train from Tallinn to Sofia? If anybody can guess? 2.5 days. How long it takes the same distance on the western part of Europe?
2 hours.
15 hours. The border between Bulgaria and Romania. 2 bridges on the river, which is 458 kilometers. 2 bridges. So if we want to effectively support Ukraine, if we want to build the resilience, we have to invest. And give me also the example what we already did as a countries, because this is not only the private money, this is not only a story about the public money. This is the story about the common effort by public money, private investors, and the PPP projects. Only 4 years, 18, 19, 5 years, sorry, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. All countries for these 3 sectors spent over 80 billion euro for this infrastructure. So we are making a progress constantly to fill in the gaps in our infrastructure, but taking into account the shaking world, the war in Ukraine, the war in the other places across the world, we have to speed up to build the infrastructure, because it means for us it is from one hand it is challenge, from the other hand it is opportunity, how to be ready to answer for some needs from the other countries that we can play in the future the very important role in the global economy, in the global supply chain. And of course, we used to repeat the 12 countries. Of course, we have right now the 13 countries, because the Greece, as you mentioned, it is the new member of the 3 Cs countries. So we have probably now the 5 Cs, not only 3 Cs. But it gives you the context that, taking into account the geographical situation and the investment effort, we will be ready to answer for this huge, huge challenge in Ukraine. As you know, everybody discuss about how to support Ukraine, how to rebuild Ukraine. And there is a lot of question, who invest, how to invest, what about the threats, what is the risk profile, who give the guarantee for this investment. How about the corruption? We talk about this many times. So there is a lot of question, but only through the partnership that we create as a 13 countries, with the strategic partnership with US, European Union, Germany. I would like to underline that Germany is one of the strategic country for the 3Cs. And of course, the new coming strategy cooperation with Japan and the other countries from the Asia. I think it is a huge opportunity for us, but not only for us. In the current situation, it is a global challenge, and we have to invest in this region together.
Thank you. Minister Gabriel, would you agree that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has added urgency to the 3Cs initiative? And if so, have you seen that urgency shared by your 3Cs counterparts across the region?
Absolutely. I think that it was very clearly said, and I want to support this idea. Investing in the countries within this region is really investing in our security, in our resilience, in our future, and it's investing in the future of Ukraine. I think that it's first, when we talk about infrastructure, of course that we need to address the gaps, and I think that we need to address another issue, how we create synergies with the other funds. And here I'm talking about the European funds, for example. I see very, very clear synergies between what we have as connectivity and Digital Europe program, Connecting Europe Facility and Transport, to see how we can ensure complementarity between, because we are fully aware that investment, we need much more. But I think that the key word here is create synergies in order to address much more rapidly, with better implementation, with better regional cooperation, these gaps in the infrastructure. Second point, I would like definitely to support the idea of innovation. That was always my position, and remember that was one of the results during the summit in Sofia in 2021. This idea to create the innovation fund was submitted. I fully believe that we need this innovation fund. We need to innovate, because it's true that we have public funds, we have private investments. We need to talk about venture capital equity. We need to funds of funds. We need to innovate in order to attract a new generation of innovators and investors that are very flexible, that are quite smart, and that are seeing the strategic importance of this region. And third is definitely this idea of more partnerships. But for me, that means that we have a challenge ahead of us to establish some priorities, because we know what's happened. Beata, you already told us the entire legacy. We remember how suddenly there was hundreds and hundreds of projects. I think that we should take a little bit of time, and now, especially with what's happened in Ukraine, to establish some priorities, to invest in this, because that there will be an added value, because that will make a difference. And I'm sure that the different countries within the initiative are ready for that. I have myself an example. We were in New York for Yunga, and we signed a common declaration between Croatia, Greece, Bulgaria, and Romania in order to identify now, the next few months, what are our three main priorities, three projects in which we'll invest heavily in order to improve infrastructure, north-south corridors, reduce dependencies. And I think that it's really time a little bit to move in this direction too.
Especially the cross-border projects.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I'm going to follow on Fred's push, but start with the governor. Here we're talking about Ukraine. From your perspective, should the 3Cs look at Ukraine as a risk or as an opportunity and a responsibility? I mean, how would it affect your outlook if they were to more deeply engage Ukraine? How would it affect your outlook on the 3Cs initiative?
Well, it's definitely a risk if you look at what's happening. But where there is risk, there is always opportunity. That's how we, the business people, think about. So despite all the risks and despite all the dangers, we want to find what are the opportunities in Ukraine or in the region. Because JBIC is support commercial project and doesn't give grants or technical assistance. It's JICA, Japanese official agency dealing with ODA, that is now supporting the Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. There's really an established network of auto companies or electric companies in the region, including Ukraine, but mostly in Eastern Europe. We want to help them. But as for the time being, Japanese companies are not very keen on investing more at this moment, but we are ready to do it. And whatever the project in the eastern part of Europe, which increases connectivity, whether it's energy or transportation or roads, we are very happy to do that. I know that over River Donau, IHI built a very bright suspension bridge. So that's the kind of technologies Japanese companies can offer. We are an earthquake-prone country. We just had a very severe earthquake at the beginning of this year, and so the resilience of infrastructure is very, very important for us. So we want to bring the things together. And also about innovation. I talked about the Ninja Fund. We also set up another venture fund last year, focusing on Eastern Europe on industrial tech and factory automation. It is headquarters in Warsaw and called FF Red and White. If you recall the flag of Japan and Poland, you can see why it's red and white. but we are really keen to take advantage of the very many talented people in the region in digital economy. So that's our approach in encouraging Japanese companies' investment, Japanese companies' business activities in the region, no matter what are the risks at this stage.
So opportunity, or with risk comes reward.
Yeah, because we are an official institution. We can take risk, and we can think in the long term. That's what we do.
Fred, would you like to elaborate on it? Because you've been one of the strongest advocates for bringing Ukraine into the 3 Cs.
Well, look, so Governor Hayashi, I find what you said very inspiring. We're in a contest for the global future. Let's just admit it. I've been calling it an inflection point for some time, and this inflection point is as crucial as the periods after World War I and World War II. And if you look at it from a U.S. standpoint, you don't want to repeat what you repeated after World War I, which led to fascism, World War II, millions of dead, the Holocaust. What you do want to do is you want to do more of what happened after World War II, which is creating international connections, institutions, working with your allies to build. What we're hoping is that it would have been nice not to have a war in the meantime, but the war has at least galvanized this conviction that we're at another inflection point. And so just like after World War I and after World War II and after the Cold War, when the Ukraine war is over, is going to offer a huge opportunity again to reinvigorate the connections among free market democratic countries. And so not only do I see Ukrainian victory as a precondition for us all. What happens in Ukraine is going to have an impact that goes way beyond the borders of Ukraine to your part of the world and to calculations that China might make regarding Taiwan. And so I think it's absolutely important that Ukraine, we're all talking about reconstruction right now, but first you need to get a secure situation in Ukraine so that reconstruction can happen. And so I think at this point we have to give Ukraine all the support we can, militarily, economically, with a very good plan to move forward quickly. And so there's certainly candidate potential for Ukraine and the European Union. I hope that will evolve with NATO as well. But I think Ukraine needs to be put in Western institutions, not for the good of Ukraine, but for the good of the Western institutions and for the good of the West. Because if we can solidify this part of Europe, Then we were talking about the region and how important, Ian, you're talking about what the region is. The center of gravity for the European Union is inevitably moving to the east. Already has. You already see this in terms of Poland and what's happening with Poland's economy. And I think that will continue as Ukraine stabilizes. I not only hope, but I expect it will over time. I hope it doesn't take as long, that it creates more damage for the country. But I think that's the new Europe, the new European map. The center of gravity has moved east. And so I think is absolutely crucial to embrace Ukraine, not just for Ukraine's sake, but for our own sake.
I just can't help but adding, but when you look at the 3Cs membership of these 13 states, there are 11 of them that have very similar experiences and history with Ukraine. I mean, first of all, there's geographic proximity. There's the historical interaction of the peoples, the shared experience of Soviet occupation, the unique lessons that the region has learned through its economic success and some of the mistakes it made in the progress to EU membership and economic growth. These are all applicable to Ukraine as it struggles to reconstruct itself and integrate itself into the European Union. So it's a capability that I think gives the region a moral responsibility, and it's an opportunity to demonstrate the 3C's leadership role in the reshaping of Europe and the completion of that vision of Europe that's undivided, free and secure. But let me talk about some of the kind of recent successes. And I'll talk to Beata again, but one of the big developments of this year was a decision after many years of negotiation by the United States Development Corporation to actually stand up a $300 million facility to support the 3Cs. How significant is that?
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, it is very significant because it gives the opportunity for another investment in region together with the U.S. development institution. So it is a very important signal for the entire region and the other investors. It is worth to invest in this region. So this is not only the $300 million. This is not story about the $300 million. This is the story about the partnership, the belief in this region, and the huge opportunity through the economy that we represent and the fastest growing region, how we created the opportunities for the private investors. So I strongly believe that we, after this first step, there will be the opportunity or the encouragement for the other private investors also to invest in this region. Project by project, maybe through the new fund that we are planning as a development institution to set up, especially for energy and digital, because it is more more readable for the private investors, because the logistic and transportation, it is used to perceive like roads and rail. Okay, it is not for the private investor, it is rather for private, public investor and the government decision. But let me underline another opportunities that we created together as business representatives. And during the summit last year, we announced the new body which was established by businesses. So association from Poland, Lithuania, Croatia, and I probably it is another countries that decided to sign together the notary deed. Yes, we are ready to cooperate together as a representative of business and the companies from this region. And we set up the 3Cs Business Development Association, which is registered in Brussels. So it is only the starting point, but I strongly believe it is not only for the attractive the other investor, but also how we can cooperate and increase the turnover between our region, between our countries. So I strongly believe it will be a fantastic idea, and step by step we develop the business through the our companies in this region. And there is a lot of ideas that we can implement. And let me remind our conversation with President Radev in Bulgaria when it was the summit in Sofia. And we have fantastic discussion. And I asked him why we cannot, through the president, the head of state, encourage the young people why the 3 Cs is so important. And I suggest maybe you, as the president of this country, can give the inauguration lecture in the most important universities in this region, but not for your country, but for the neighbor of this in this region. So Mr. Radev can go to Estonia, and Estonian president go to Croatia and the others, because we don't need only the involvement of the official governments, head of states, but also the young people, because the 3 Cs initiatives, this is not story the current situation. This is the story for next generation and for the future.
And
I just want to intervene with one second, and then go to the Deputy Prime Minister. The creation of this business association, Beat, is one of the wonderful things that you and others have helped bring about, because as long as it was an intergovernmental situation, good to see government support, good to see that governments wanted to work together, but it's really the business opportunity that's going to unlock it. And so I also like the fact that you're talking about the next generation as well, but congratulations on the business association. But now the business association should get active and give the government some ideas about what they might be able to do to make this go faster.
Yeah, I would like also to support how important was the message by the creation of this Business Development Association. And it's not unheard that now all the time we have the summit and we have the business forum, and we are all waiting for next April to see in Lithuania how it will going. Because for me, they have a very, very special responsibility. Of course, they will talk about solutions, challenges, but they can give much more visibility to already the success stories, because some of them are real success stories, some of the members that are now part of this association. And second, I would like also to support this idea of how to involve much more young people in this initiative. And we have even a very concrete example. I shared this during the summit in Bucharest. I was the head of the delegation this year, but we discussed with President Radev before. Now at European level, we have the European alliances of universities. That's our European universities of the future. It's 13 universities working together, specialized on some topics, health or climate. Why we don't have a European alliance of universities dedicated to the issues of energy, transport and connectivity, because that is the 3 Cs initiative. I think it's just a question really to start to be a little bit more vocal about the idea, and that will be one of the good examples if we can create this.
Well, you have the mic. Let me ask a question based leveraging your experience on the European Commission. What should the 3 Cs be doing to deepen its relationship with the Commission, with the European Union?
Well, first, I think that the European Commission is already supporting the initiative, but what we would like to see now is a much more deep cooperation. And that's why I'm talking about synergies, because we are talking about complementarities, how we can create these complementarities with what already the European Commission is doing. We have the Common Agricultural Fund, we have the Energy Fund, we have different programs that are here to address these issues of regional infrastructures, much more connectivity. And I think that we need to talk a little bit more concretely. It's good that we need a bridge on the Danube, but where is the Connecting Europe facility? Where is the Danube program? Where is the Danube strategy? Where is the European Regional Development Fund? The same when we talk about how to reduce the dependency on energy. I think that first, the European Commission have a very good program on hydrogen. The biggest partnership on clean hydrogen is a European one. We have a very strong focus on small modular reactors, the next generations. So I think that will be a great momentum to seize, because we have European elections in only a few months. In the beginning of the next Commission, to talk a little bit more concretely, identifying those priorities and creating synergies with the European programs and with what was already done with the 3 Cs initiative, and where we can have a common future.
You know,
If I may, one sentence. We have as a five biggest development banks last year in May in Madrid. A lot of discussion about how to invest, what is the role of development institution, and so on, so on. And together with the European Union and the EU Commission, how we can support to development of European Union. And with not we. The most of Western development institutions start to discuss about the Caribbean countries and South America. And I ask, why you don't think about the Central Eastern part of Europe? Because we are the younger sisters and brothers of the European Union. And firstly, if we are thinking about the build a stronger entire European Union, we have to invest here in Europe, in Central Eastern part of Europe. Especially, we are the eastern flank of NATO, and we are the neighbors of the Ukraine, where is regular war. And we have to be ready to answer for these challenges for the European Union before we are going to the Caribbean.
Or, well, that's the foreign minister who is speaking. Diplomacy, it's important, and we need really to have friends and allies and partners. I think that it's simply important to identify the like-minded partners, those with whom we share common ambitions. We already have some common standards, a level of technological development. We share the same democratic values, and it's possible to identify these partnerships that will bring a definitely added value, because Japan, it's an important partner, and in Caribbean region, we have important partners too. I think that, again, here the challenge is to decide really to do things, to prioritize, and after, step by step, to realize it as soon as possible, because we are facing global challenges, but because we are together, we can address them in a different way.
And
so
prioritize.
it's also about marketing. That's why I think this association is so important, to constantly press the opportunities of the region. But we're coming up on the end of our time, so I want to just go into one speed round. Looking forward, in April, Lithuania will host the next 3C Summit and Business Forum. What do you think ought to be the deliverables at that event? What do you think ought to be the activities and priorities of the 3Cs looking forward to make the region even more attractive to foreign investment? And I'll start with the governor and just walk.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yes, well, for example, hydrogen is a very important piece to connect more together the countries in the region. Well, I talked about the chances and opportunities, but I have to say again, I have to add that each economy in the region is very small. And business people wouldn't want to invest in a small economy where the labor market or the market is very limited. So you have to bring more and more together in terms of physical connectivity and also policy connectivity. You have to have a more consistent and transparent and united policy to sell 3C's area to the business people. Well, people think of investing in Poland or investing in Bulgaria in terms of that they're in the EU and relatively cheap labor, but not think of 3Cs as a market. So there has to be a more and more powerful move from the politician and from the business community to sell the region as a business opportunity. Thank you.
I was hoping you were going to say an investment from the Japan bank.
well, if you do have, investment will come, and we are
Here.
ready to support it.
Minister.
Well, I expect confirmation of our support for Ukraine. I think that it's really important, but starting to identify the different projects on which we can work together. Of course, more innovation and new technologies, hydrogen, but also batteries, solar renewables, and all these questions we need now to think about this green transition, net zero technologies. Cybersecurity, I very much hope this part of Europe is very well known for that, because we need to secure, and well, I'm sure that there will be a little bit more discussion about military mobility, because let's not forget, we are all members of the European Union, but we are also members of NATO, and we are facing a crucial phase. My personal wish is maybe to start finally to talk about the empowerment of women in innovation and ICT and the role of women in young researchers in these topics.
Yeah.
I fully agree with Governor Hayashi that we have to find a way how to represent ourselves as a three-seas region and a huge opportunity as an entire region for the private investor especially, because every single small country is not enough attractive for the big investors. So we have to, and I strongly believe through the three-seas summit, we spread the information about the entire region and only common effort to represent ourselves together as a huge opportunity for the private investors. It is one that I strongly believe that we will be able to achieve after the Three-Seas Summit in Vilnius. And of course, the Three-Seas Business Development Association, it will be another step to underline this is the way how we want to cooperate in the entire region and the business first. And there will be more opportunities for the PPP project, private-public partnership.
Fred?
So we're in a competition to decide what set of values, what set of countries, what set of institutions are going to define the future. The three C's, I think, has to be seen in that light. And so I would argue for changing the map. And I change the map in two ways. First of all, I would change the map in bringing in the projects that are not counted at the moment as part of the Three C's project. I'm happy at the Atlantic Council to create that map if people want to work with us to do this. But your own NuScale project should be there in Romania. The Intel plan to do a semiconductor plant in Poland. Goldman Sachs has major operations in Warsaw. Amazon opening a corporate office in Romania. Yes, it should be cross-border, but also just seeing how the marketing excitement of this becoming an exciting place to invest. And then finally, the second way I would change the map is I would bring in Ukraine, perhaps Moldova, perhaps Western Balkans. It is so hard to get in the European Union. It's going to take so many years. Three C's ought to make it easier. And you can get a jump start on the European Union. So I would change the map in those two ways.
I agree with Fred. My big hope with Vilnius would be an invitation for Ukraine, and that would highlight the role and the leadership of the Three C's initiative. It would create new opportunities for the Three C's. I think I'd complement that with a tangible infrastructure project that pulls, that goes across a Three C's country's border into Ukraine. That's tangible, that's operational, and it would underscore the power and potentials of the Three C's region, and it's the right thing to do. So with that,
before we close, I want to salute Ian Brzezinski. There is nobody in Washington, nobody in the United States who has been more of a champion for Three C's, and so he's moderating, but he's the expert.
With that said, let me thank our panelists. We've had a great discussion on that, underscored that economic vibrancy of the Three C's region, its role as a driver of European growth. We've explored the rationale and the need for the Three C's initiative, its emphasis on infrastructure, and we had a great discussion looking forward on how it can become even more effective in its effort to complete the vision of a Europe that's undivided, whole, and free. So thank you all.